Revive family. I hope you all are doing well and taking it easy. Before we jump into this week's devotional, a few announcements. The first one is going to be we're going to have our online Zoom meeting this Saturday at 2 p.m. Link and everything is always the same, and you can always find it within our email. And the second announcement is an exciting one. We are going to start doing our sort of hybrid between online and in-person meetings starting in August. So more details to come. Our main contact will be through email, so check back there for updates. And if you want to join our email listing, go ahead and just send an email or a text to one of us. Our email address is afmcrevive@gmail.com. So if you just send a request to be added to the email list, we'll definitely add your email in there, and that way you can get all of our fun emails and updates and stay all up to date with what's going on here at Revive. All right, jumping into this week's devotional, we are continuing our series in Nehemiah, and we are going through the chapters 7 through 10 this week. So it's a big one, but these chapters kind of break down or like boil down to kind of like these 3 R words. And shout out to Michael for coming up with these, but they are remembering, repentance, and recommitment. And so let's kind of look at these sort of in the context of the whole story. So where are we on the timeline? Well, the wall is now built. And so, yeah, the wall's finished now, and now God's putting on Nehemiah's heart to create kind of this registry of people. So he lists basically in chapter 7 a bunch of people that live there. And then around the 7th month, everyone comes together and they have this big gathering. By this point, everyone has kind of settled into the town. They gather together, and here's the first R word, remember. And so they kind of take time to remember their stories, remember their past. They read from the law, bowed and worshiped God, and they remembered their past. And then the second one was repentance. And so all of a sudden they start being convicted of their sins, and they start weeping and crying and mourning. And Nehemiah all of a sudden says, not to grieve, but to have joy and to rejoice in what God's doing and the work he's doing. And the work he's done, right? They finished the wall. And that's where that famous verse comes from. For the joy of the Lord is our strength. And that's where Nehemiah is telling the people, to have joy and to rejoice, and not to mourn on this day of celebration. From there, they sort of confessed their sins and they repented. And so leading into the third R, which is recommitment, or last sort of section of this passage, was them sort of remaking their promises, recommitting their lives back to God. So when I was sort of reading through these chapters and thinking about them, I was really stuck to chapter 8, which is where they're mourning and they're crying and they're weeping. And I was just a little confused at first. I was like, why the heck are they crying and why are they sad when they just rebuilt this wall and, there's a time of celebration? I mean, they've been looking towards this for so long, and then to have it finished, I would think, yeah, they would be rejoicing, they would be happy. But then as I sort of, dug a little bit deeper into what that was looking at, I kind of realized that there were sort of 2 main things that came out. One, it was that they were recognizing how good and how faithful God is. This is something that they have been praying for, they've been working towards. They've experienced a lot of opposition and a lot of trials. And so, one of them was just, crying for recognizing how good and how faithful God is. But then the second part also was, I think they were just so convicted and realized how far away they've turned from God, right? Through the remembering, they realized where they had been and how God had brought them to this place and how he has always been faithful, but also how they have not been faithful. And so even though God has been faithful towards them, it wasn't always reciprocated. And so I thought it was very interesting how Nehemiah then says to not grieve, but to rejoice. And I think what Nehemiah was trying to get at was how their sorrow was overpowering the joy of God's work. And that even though we are made aware of our downfalls and the parts where we fall short, we can always walk in joy and in confidence that God is doing a good work within us. And I feel like even as I was reflecting, God was convicting me about judging the Israelites. And I think I realized more and more how similar I am to them, and how many times I also have been too paralyzed by the fact of seeing such a great sort of mountain before me. You know, seeing a big problem or a big mountain of sin or something that's before me that just seems too big can be very paralyzing and even overwhelming in some ways. And sometimes I feel like, you know, I'm not ready to face that. And so, you know, I can see how the Israelites, just when they were convicted of their sin, just cried and wept and mourned. I think also when we're just faced with such difficulty, it's hard to not feel stuck, right? Not feel overwhelmed or overpowered by those things. A lot of times too, I think when I'm looking at the mountain of whatever it is, maybe it's a problem or some sort of worry or doubt or a sin, and just looking at the magnitude of it, it's like I forget that God is so much bigger than those things. So I think I was even reminded that it's not so much about focusing on the mountain that's before me, but at the God that's next to me. And when I focus on God who's next to me, the mountain doesn't seem so big anymore. But that's so much easier to say when you're not within the situation. And I think what, you know, the Israelites in this passage was also getting about was, you know, it's a lot easier to remember how big God is and how He is so much bigger than the mountain that we see before us, through remembering where God has brought us, right? When we look back and we see all the other mountains that we thought we could not face, we couldn't conquer, we couldn't get past, and seeing how God brought us through those things, that helps empower us to move forward into the future, right? When we face another mountain, you know, we know that God's going to pull through. We know that He's faithful, and that those things shouldn't be holding us back. So then thinking about even how many mountains have I faced and how has God delivered me from those, that remembering those things and those mountains that we've conquered in the past really helps empower you to move forward into the future. And as I was thinking about this Devo, God brought up one particular story in mind, and that was kind of the first time I prayed for a stranger who I didn't know if was Christian or not, like a complete stranger, and it wasn't in like a Christian or like a spiritual environment at all. Okay, so this happened in college, about my sophomore year, and it was kind of late at night. I was walking to a friend's place to kind of go hang out and study, and her place was behind the gym, so I had to walk past it. And so yeah, I was walking to her place, and I was kind of coming up towards the gym, and I see kind of this guy, and he's limping, and I think it's like, okay, he got injured or whatever. And kind of immediately, almost immediately in my head, I just heard a voice kind of say, like, you should go pray for him. And I was like, heck no, I am not gonna go do that. I don't know this dude. It's at night. This is sketch. Like, nothing about this is remotely a yes, in my opinion. But I kind of felt a sort of like strong feeling, and I kind of knew that was kind of like God convicting my heart of like, okay, you should go pray for him. And I was like, okay. So I was like, no, I'll just put it off to the side. I'm like, maybe it's just me or whatever. And so I pulled off to the side, and he's still like kind of like limping and walking. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna pretend to be on my phone or something. So I'm on my phone. I'm like, okay, well, okay, God, like, if you want me to do this, when I turn on the screen, the last number will be odd. And I turn it on, it's even. I'm like, okay, that's it. Nope, that's not it. That's not happening. So I was like, okay, well, the sign said no, so we're just gonna keep walking. So I got up after a little bit, and by this time, he's kind of like a little bit farther off, like he's walked past me at this point. And so I keep walking the way I was walking, and then in my heart, I was just like, oh man, I feel it. I just know that I'm supposed to go pray for this dude. I'm like, I don't want to do it. Like, that's so awkward. Like, God, please no. Like, please don't make me do this. And I felt it so strong in my heart though that I had to pull over to the side again. I was like, okay, if he's not too far off, maybe I'll do it. And I look back, I'm like, okay, he's kind of far off. I'm like, okay, no, I'm not gonna do it. So then I keep walking the same direction as I was going. But oh man, it was like one of those things that I just could not deny that it was God convicting my heart. And I was just like internally battling him, like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's so awkward. He's going to be awkward. I don't even know if he's a Christian. If he's not a Christian, what if he rejects me? He's going to think I'm so weird. Like, I was like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. And then just the internal battle, I just knew if I kept walking and I walked away that I would regret it. Real quick, but I turned around really fast and started walking towards the guy, and by this time he's kind of far off. And the thing is though is that, you know, he's limping, so I caught up kind of fast and I was like, oh man. But then I'm like hesitating, so I'm walking like literally right behind the dude, and I'm hesitating, like I don't even know how to start the conversation, like, hey, hello, I don't know. So yeah, so I was walking behind him for a little while, and it was kind of awkward because he, you know, obviously was limping and I was not. So it was this weird of like, I have to walk kind of slow to still be behind him. I don't know, it was bad. And then I'm pretty sure he could see, like, you know, the shadows of me like walking really close behind him but not saying anything. I'm like, that was probably even creepier. But anyways, I finally got up the courage to just say like, excuse me, like, hey. And then he turns around, and then I was like, I just kind of spewed out all the words like, hey, I noticed you're limping, and I just was wondering if I could pray for you. And he was really nice. He was like, yeah, sure, like, okay. And so then I was like, okay, great. So then I just was so nervous that I just kind of like word vomited nonsense. And I'm pretty sure I remember saying like, praying for this dude, and it was not eloquent at all. It was literally just like, pray for a knee heal, and that God, you in your name, Jesus, and yeah, like no pain. And and then I was like, okay, amen. And I just bolted the other way, and I was so embarrassed. And I mean, he was very nice. He said thanks, but yeah, after that I just like booked it out of there. And so maybe like when we were like way feet apart, I kind of turned around really quick because I just needed to catch my breath of being like, what the heck just happened? What did I do? And I kind of looked back and I saw he wasn't limping, or he wasn't limping as much. And it was interesting because even far away, he kind of looked back at the same time. And I think we both had this mutual like, what the heck just happened? But at that point, you know, I just turned back around. I just started walking back to my friend's place, and I just started bawling. Like, I am just crying. I'm a mess. And again, just like the Israelites, I feel like it was a mix of like, God, you're so good. Thank you for just pulling me through this, even though it was a mess. Like, I'm so grateful, God, that you showed up. And even if it wasn't like he was healed or anything, and I don't even know if he was healed or not, but it was just the fact that God had pulled me through that situation of just really stepping out my comfort zone at that point. And yeah, just that God was with me in that. And I think the other part was that I was convicted. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how could I ever doubt you, God? Like, why was this such a big deal? And yeah, I just felt like it was a lot of conviction of like, why have I doubted you? I've prayed for people before, and I know that was not that big of a deal, but God, you're so good, and I am so sorry for doubting that you would ever not show up. Yeah, and I just felt Like, why did I doubt you, God? Why did I ever think that you would call me to do something and you not have a plan for it? Yeah, I mean, I don't even think I made full sentences, to be honest, but I think I was just amazed that God even gave me the courage just to do that, because I definitely would not have done that on my own. And if it wasn't for the conviction in my heart, definitely, heck no, would have never ever done anything like that. God definitely convicted my heart when reading the passage that I am a lot like the Israelites. And I think reflecting on this situation, of course, that's where I was at that point. That's where I was at that point. But I think, moving forward, first of all, I still don't think I would pray for a stranger unless God really convicts me to, which is something I'm still working on, I guess. But I think I think even remembering the past, remembering that story, I think it gives me a lot more confidence and courage to be able to do that in the future, right? I don't know, maybe I would be, but I think I would have at least hoped to have grown a little bit more in that area, that I wouldn't feel so uncomfortable sharing God's love and praying for people in spaces that are not Christian or not spiritual or whatever. And I think even just thinking of that situation, like all the times that I've prayed for other people before that, in those Christian settings, and praying for healing in Christian settings and feeling more confident in those areas, like those are kind of the foundations of why I was even able to pray in the first place, for that guy. Because if I didn't have that and God didn't show up there at all, like, I don't think I would have even attempted to pray for that dude. So I think, yeah, looking back at those past sort of mountains and hesitations and everything kind of builds that foundation God's calling me to do in the future, and how that builds confidence, and I'm reminded of how God provides, and again am convicted in my heart of the doubt and the worry and everything that comes with just looking at that mountain, or even the mountain itself. So I think moving forward, part of the remembering is realizing certain truths, right? Like that God's never gonna not show up. He just might not show up the way we think he's gonna show up. And that he's always faithful, and he always is looking out for us and wants the best for us. And so even truths with God and with ourselves, of knowing that I am capable or confident enough to go and pray for that person, or even thinking of values like I am valued and I am heard. Those are things that ground us in what God has proven true in the past, and that will remind us and will stay true in the future when we face those mountains. So that's kind of what our reflection time is going to be. I wanted to spend our reflection time sort of thinking about not only our current state, maybe a mountain that you recently have conquered or are going through and struggling with now, but also sort of looking at those past mountains, the things that you've conquered in the past and that God has brought you through, and realizing that there are truths in that, right? That God has proven himself in some way. So in our reflection time, I kind of want you to just close your eyes and let's just spend a few moments to reflect on your situation you are in now. Is there a mountain that you're facing, or a mountain that you just conquered? What is it in your life that may seem too big for you to tackle? And now we're going to take a few minutes just to kind of look back. Like, what were those mountains that you faced before, that the ones that you conquered, the ones that God brought you through, the ones that, you're victorious over? What were those things? And now, writing down from those things, what are some truths about yourself, about God, that you need to remember, that, you need to remember moving forward, things that he has revealed to you in your past? What are those things that we need to be reminded of every time we face a mountain? Things like God is our provider, that He is our conqueror, that He goes before us. Or things like for yourself would be, I am capable and I am worthy, I am loved and I'm seen, that I can pray for a stranger and it will be all okay, that I am stronger than I think I am. And I kind of want you to write it in the forms of I am and God is, because those are sort of more declarations. And those declarations, just the fact of saying them out loud or writing them, really kind of like speaks into the spiritual realm and kind of like brings life to them, right? It's not something that we're hoping for or that we're trying to reach for or a goal or anything, but these are things that are truth, that are things within us that are already in us, and just we need to be reminded of, and sometimes need to bring that out or be activated, but they're already within us. And those declarations are almost like stating facts. And so I encourage you to write them out and say them out and pray them over yourself, and even just maybe like putting them on a piece of paper or on something so that you can see them often, so that whenever you're faced with some sort of difficulty, faced with some sort of mountain, that you are reminded that you are strong and that you are capable, you are loved, and that God is with you and He goes before you and He has conquered any mountain that you will ever face. So I pray that we all just be challenged, and that we take some time to just thank God and remember what He's done for us, how He's brought us through, and how He's leading us towards the future. That these mountains, that these things that just seem so out of our control, so humongous to us, are nothing to God, and that we keep our eyes not on that mountain, but on God who is beside us. I hope to see you guys all this Saturday at our Revive Zoom meeting, and take care, everyone.